All I had was sticks and stones to do a song. One shot to give them something they could read. Lay it down, place your bets. This is what we call rhythm roulette. All I had was sticks and stones to do a song. One shot to give them something they could read. Lay it down, place your bets. This is what we call rhythm roulette. I'm thinking. If I need your help, I can't do it myself when I got no one left. While I'm getting this money out at the club stunting, I heard them jackers coming. I give my all for more when I'm at my lowest low. Say if I go to war, Lord, just watch over mine as I lay it down. Get to it one more time. Okay, chill. Father, I promise I won't straighten up. If you on your way, you about to do it big. You to tell him, shout it. I just touched down. Hey, what it is, shout it, yeah. I'm going places, shout it. I just touched down. Hey, what it is, shout it, yeah. I'm going places, shout it. I just touched down. Hey, what it is, shout it, yeah. I'm going places, shout it. I just touched.
Justin Scott, aka Big K.R.I.T, would be born in Meridian, Mississippi in August of 1986. As a kid, his parents were split, which led to him being raised by his grandmother. Growing up, he had a passion for baseball, but his love for music would blossom, and this love would ultimately change his life. Just like many rappers, he was drawn to the art by freestyling on corners and gaining his local notoriety from that. His taste in music can largely be attributed to his grandmother and his father. On one hand, his grandmother was very religious and made sure that he attended church growing up, where he eventually joined the choir. Alongside introducing him to gospel, she was also a blues fan, in which we can see that influence in K.R.I.T's music. On the other hand, he had his dad who introduced him to the likes of the Ghetto Boys, LL Cool J, and MC Hammer. But it would be through his own discovery that he found groups like 3 6 Mafia and Goody Mob, which also influenced his music in years to come. How K.R.I.T even started making music was out of pure necessity. He simply could not afford to pay for beats back in the day. He would ask his dad to buy instrumentals for him, but due to their financial situation, the answer was always no. This is what caused K.R.I.T to start making beats himself, and he said that he started out making beats on his PlayStation. I'm assuming he either used the Music Maker games or the MTV Music Generator games, but I'm not entirely sure because that's like a little before my time though. But it would be a relationship with a local sound mixing engineer that would change everything for him. This sound mixing engineer would expose K.R.I.T to Pro Tools, compressors, preamps, and other recording devices. After learning about these things, K.R.I.T would spend hours on one verse or one hook and one beat, mixing to make sure that they were all the way right. This dedication to getting his music exactly right would stay with him throughout his music career. In the 11th grade, he began putting out CDs with early titles such as Coming Out Hard and Dirty 30. After graduating high school, he attended a community college in his hometown, but dropped out and really started to grind with his music. He kept up the releases, hoping that one day this hard work and hours of dedication to his craft would pay off. He would have to do a bit of waiting though, with him releasing his first official mixtape, See Me On Top, in July of 2005. It wouldn't be until 2010 that he got recognized for his music in a big way. This would be the year that K.R.I.T was signed to a major label, but before signing to a major label, K.R.I.T had a joint venture with Cinematic Music Group. CMG is an independent label. Before getting with Cinematic, K.R.I.T almost called it quits with making music. By this time, he had already left Meridian, Mississippi, Mississippi to go to Atlanta to further pursue his music career. However, things didn't really work out for him when he was in Atlanta, and he would get evicted from his place. After being evicted, K.R.I.T was left with no choice but to move back home, and he was extremely close to calling it a career before he even blew up. He was struggling to pay his bills or even feed himself, so he thought about doing something that was more secure. Fortunately for him, K.R.I.T got a call from Johnny Shipes of Cinematic Music Group in late 2009 to be a part of their label. Johnny found K.R.I.T through him being presented to him as a producer that was shopping his beats for a ringtone company that Johnny was consulting for at the time. Johnny was looking for producers that had good beats. Johnny would hear the Big K.R.I.T song Just Touched Down, and before he knew who it was, he wondered who was on the hook to that song. He thought that the beat was really good, and he was also intrigued by the person rapping. When he found out that it was K.R.I.T, he listened to all of his projects before K.R.I.T was here and saw a lot of potential in him, which led to him calling him up. In May of 2010, K.R.I.T would release his mixtape K.R.I.T Was Here under Cinematic Music Group and Nature Sounds. This mixtape has some heaters on it with songs like Return of Forever, Just Touched Down, Country-ish, and Glass House. But by far, my favorite record from this mixtape is Children of the World.
And they wonder why we bang, cause the police do the same. That's the only rival gang, I'm just sitting here.
Really dope track, and this mixtape would ultimately lead to K.R.I.T getting an offer from Def Jam Records. Sha Money XL, who was the senior VP of A&R at Def Jam Records, tried to sign Big K.R.I.T. For those who don't know who Sha Money XL is, he was the president of G-Unit Records for a point in time before this position. K.R.I.T would sign with Def Jam the very next month after K.R.I.T was here. Sha Money XL really believed in K.R.I.T. In an interview, he was asked about K.R.I.T, and he would say, "Big K.R.I.T has the best message to send in hip-hop. His words sit in your soul unlike any other rapper out there. I've memorized his songs and used it as poetry because he's speaking stuff that mother effers are afraid to talk about, don't want to talk about. He knows how to make it sound cool. It's not trap rap, it's not sit down and be a Buddhist either. It's real hip-hop soul. It's just indescribable. There's no one like it. Big K.R.I.T is gonna be a Grammy-nominated award winner." When I told you that I knew 50 was gonna be hot, this dude is the hottest rapper in the next 10 years. Hearing this and knowing how K.R.I.T's career went in the mainstream, it kind of sucks. Sha really believed that K.R.I.T had everything to be the next big thing, which he did, but sometimes things aren't meant to be, which is why we'll advance with the story. K.R.I.T Was Here was the last project that he would drop in 2010, and it wouldn't be until March of 2011 when he would drop another. This would be Return of Forever, which was released under Cinematic Music Group. It would release to critical acclaim and was highly praised. My favorite tracks on here are Dreamin', Rotation, and Highs and Lows. It should also be noted that the track My Sub would be the start of his My Sub song series. It's essentially a series of songs that appear on numerous projects by K.R.I.T. It's a 5-part series as of now. I think it's also notable to mention the song The Vent that appears on this project. This is a lot of people's favorite Big K.R.I.T song. It's a really deep song. To Big K.R.I.T himself, this is one of his most meaningful songs. This song is in dedication to his late grandmother, who meant a lot to him. He has quite a few songs dedicated to her, with another one being the song Yesterday, which appears on Forever and a Day. But 2011 will be a huge year for K.R.I.T because alongside releasing Return of Forever, he would also be featured on the 2011 XXL freshman class. In all honesty, this is a really good class. You have Meek Mill, Kendrick Lamar, YG, Lil B, Diggy Simmons, Yellow Wolf, Sahai the Prince, Fred the Godson, Lil Twist, and Mac Miller. Safe to say that K.R.I.T was in very good company. Making it on the XXL cover was at least at this time a big deal because essentially XXL were saying that these selected guys are the leaders of the new school. About being on the cover, K.R.I.T would say, "It's amazing to be a part of a group of individuals that definitely made a name for themselves as far as music is concerned, to be able to put my music on a platform where millions of people can hear it and to be recognized for what I do. Just to be a part of this, even as far as hip hop is concerned. It's amazing and I feel blessed. I want to keep doing what I'm doing, making quality music. I'm trying to make timeless music and not switching it up. I've got a lot of good people around me, great team, and I'm going to stick to what works. The law of averages isn't important. When you continue trying to do something you work hard for, you're bound to succeed at it." What I did get from this XXL interview is that K.R.I.T's debut album album on Def Jam was due for a 2011 release in the summer of that year, but that ultimately would not happen. What did happen was him releasing R4 the prequel in June of that year. This would be his first project released under Def Jam, and it's essentially an EP of songs taken from Krit Was Here and Return of Forever. The standout song from this project would be the remix to Country Ish, which would end up being his most popular song to date. 2012 would finally be the year that Krit would release his debut studio album. As for the reason why the album took 2 years to release was due to Krit dedicating those 2 years leading up to it, building his fan base from the ground up. He was also trying to make his music as organic as possible. Also, Big K.R.I.T went on to write and produce his whole debut album, which is pretty impressive at that. There were some other reasons why the album kind of took so long, because K.R.I.T self-admittedly is his worst critic and did not want to release the album until it was 100%. Obviously, there was a lot of pressure from the label to put up big numbers and sell, but to him, he just wanted the fans to simply hear his music regardless. But 2 months before the release of his debut album, K.R.I.T would release the mixtape Forever in a Day. This was a free mixtape that he made to hold his fans over until his debut album. My favorite tracks from this mixtape are Booby Miles, Forever in a Day theme song, and Me and My Old School. To me, the best track on the mixtape hands down is Temptation.
We ain't tripping on the summer color stars hot. Home wheels, candy paint, bring the walls hot. Damn, trying to.
This is probably my favorite Big K.R.I.T song of all time. I don't know if K.R.I.T had sample clearance issues or just changed it up, but that version just did not hit the same to me. Finally, in June of 2012, K.R.I.T would release his debut studio album, Live from the Underground. The album went on a peak at number 5 on the Billboard 200 with first week sales of 41,000 copies. It garnered generally positive reviews, but to K.R.I.T himself, this is his most slept on project. In my opinion, this is a very solid project, and there are some songs on here that I really love. Songs like I Got This, Rich Dad Poor Dad, My Sub Part 2, and Yeah That's Me. I also came around to the song Cool to Be Southern due to the song being on the 2K14 soundtrack, and I used to play the hell out of that game. I think now it's the perfect time to break down the meaning behind Big K.R.I.T's name. In an interview, he would say, "Before K.R.I.T was an acronym, it was critical. When I would perform at open mics in the early 2000s, people had difficulty pronouncing my name and understanding it. So I decided to shorten it and called myself K.R.I.T. As far as K.R.I.T's current meaning, I thank God I was able to come up with the acronym King Remembered in Time. It's something that I will never be able to live up to as an artist, but it allows me to keep grinding and not get complacent." This pretty much wraps up the first part of the video where I covered K.R.I.T's come up all the way up to the release of his debut album. But so far in, if you like the content, you should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. I just made a TikTok account, so go out and show me some love on there since I'm trying to get that popping. Also, follow my Instagram too. That would be greatly appreciated. You guys can always reach out and just show me some love. It's all good. In part 2, I'll cover K.R.I.T's career from 2013 to the present day. In 2013, K.R.I.T only released one project, but he still managed to be the topic of conversation this year with a song-stealing verse on a classic posse cut rap track and his name being mentioned by Kendrick Lamar's genre-shaking verse on Control. First, we would see K.R.I.T appear on A$AP Rocky's legendary posse cut track, One Train. How the track came about was due to Rocky wanting to show love to the underground and make a posse cut of the underground MCs of his era. He wanted to bring that feeling back because he felt that nobody really did the whole posse cut thing since the 90s. Rocky hand selected all the features on the track for different reasons. The track One Train consists of A$AP Rocky, Kendrick Lamar, Yellow Wolf, Action Bronson, Danny Brown, Joey Badass, and Big K.R.I.T. Many people, including me, feel like K.R.I.T stole the show on the song, going last and having the longest verse. He really proved that he was one of the greats of his generation amongst his peers. Everybody came in and did their thing on the track, but K.R.I.T just went into a extra gear. Rocky would say this about K.R.I.T's verse: "K.R.I.T rips the whole track. I'ma be honest, I think it is the best verse, man. Me and Ebro were going back and forth about it before. We was debating because it's just like you can't really say one is better than the other because because everybody is different on it and you can't really compare one rapper to another. I'm gonna have to go with Krit though, man. I told him to do 16 bars and he did about 120. Months after his verse on Control, Krit would drop his mixtape King Remembered in Time in April of 2013. In my opinion, the standouts from this project are Purpose, Talking About Nothing, King Without a Crown, and My Trunk. The last song on the mixtape is Multi Till the Sun Die, and this track is truly beautiful. It's a sad yet inspiring track detailing Krit's grind to his position and making note of the people who got him there. The Multi in the title of the song is in reference to Multi Alumni, which is a record label that was founded by Krit himself. Definitely go listen to it if you haven't heard it yet. It's a truly amazing song. In August of 2013, Big Sean would release the song Control, which featured Jay Electronica and Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick's verse in the song would cause a huge stir in the rap scene. Towards the end of his verse, he said that he's usually homeboys with the people he raps with, but this is hip hop and they should know what time it is. He has love for these people, but he's still trying to murder them lyrically. It's just the competitive nature of hip hop that Kendrick was trying to keep alive, but the media and some people misconstrued what Kendrick was trying to do with his verse. It was all in good fun on his part because he would name rappers such as J. Cole, Pusha T, Mac Miller, A$AP Rocky, and Drake as rappers who were his homeboys, but also he wanted to kill them lyrically on a track. Big K.R.I.T would be the second name that Kendrick Lamar mentioned in that part of his verse. Now, there were numerous rappers who responded to Kendrick's verse for different reasons. Some rappers did it in good fun, some were angered by Kendrick calling himself the king in New York, and there were even rappers who felt a type of way about Kendrick not mentioning their name on the track. Rappers like Papoose, Joe Budden, Joel Ortiz, and King Los would be only a few of the rappers who responded to the Control verse. In my opinion, Big K.R.I.T had the best response to this verse, hands down. There's no debate. You can argue with your mama, Big K.R.I.T killed everybody in my opinion. He would respond to Control with his song Mount Olympus in April of 2014. In this song, K.R.I.T rapped that he was getting a lot of attention due to Kendrick name dropping him on Control. He would also comment about the number of rappers responding to Control over the Control beat, comparing it to An Ugly Girl that everybody done hit raw. After this, he would rap that people have been blowing him up about the verse in which K.R.I.T felt like Kendrick didn't even really diss him on it. He wasn't drawn into the propaganda because rap isn't real. But while this track is noted to be a response to Control, it's also a response to K.R.I.T's doubters. He would rap that now after Control, he was considered lyrical when the year prior, people were claiming that they couldn't even understand him due to his southern accent. He raps that he thinks that people and critics overlook him so much to the point that God himself could come down to earth and tell the world that K.R.I.T is the greatest and people still would not give him enough shine. K.R.I.T would further say this about the verse, and that Mount Olympus record was really me letting people know I'm a lyricist, and again, don't sleep on me in this music game. And the aggression also comes from feeling like sometimes I've had to prove myself over and over, and it got to the point now in my career where I'm like, look at my catalog, look at my mixtapes that could have been albums. And to produce all this music and write my own music wasn't an easy feat, but it's a part of my story at the same time. But I just wanted to point out things here and there that may get overlooked, or even me as a musician, like why I gotta be like that. So Mount Olympus was just the first part of that because Catalactica is the next chapter of it all, and I'm excited for people to hear that too. Catalactica would end up being K.R.I.T's sophomore album, which went on to release in 2014. This album would end up being a lot different than his debut album. Catalactica would be K.R.I.T's first concept album. He would also step back as a producer because doing everything himself was getting stressful. He also wanted to show his growth musically. K.R.I.T also didn't want to sample as much on this album. Notably, his debut album had plenty of sample clearance issues. With Catalactica, it was a creative and financial decision for him to not go down that route. It should also be noted that in 2018, K.R.I.T would reveal that he almost went broke making Catalactica. The reason why is because he was investing all of his money into this album without Def Jam knowing. He wanted to finish the album without asking for any budget. While doing this, K.R.I.T realized that money doesn't make you happy and that he had been abusing his vice, which we'll talk about later. But the meaning behind the name of Catalactica starts with the cover art for K.R.I.T's debut album, Live from the Underground. In the cover art, you'll see a Cadillac that crashed into Earth. K.R.I.T is the planet that this K.R.I.T came from, which is essentially Krit's thoughts and how they can be obscured sometimes. In November of 2014, Krit would release K.R.I.T, which went on to peak at number 5 on the Billboard 200 with first week sales of 44,000 copies. My favorite songs on here are My Sub Part 3, K.R.I.T, Soul Food, and Lack Lack. On this album, Krit had a song called King of the South where he declared himself as the King of the South. I should also add that unfortunately the sample for Mount Olympus could not get cleared in time, so there ended up being a reprised version of the song on the album. Definitely does not hit the same as the original version in my opinion. Sadly, this ended up being Krit's last album on Def Jam and his last album for 3 years. In 2016, just 2 years after the release of K.R.I.T, Big K.R.I.T and Def Jam would part ways. Before this news would surface, Krit would release the 12 for 12 mixtape. 12 for 12 is a collection of freestyles that Big K.R.I.T released on the 5th of July in 2016. The first freestyle was released around 12 AM and the other 11 followed at the top of each coming hour frequently until the last was released at 12 AM of the next day. At the conclusion of this is when Krit announced that he was no longer with Def Jam. There are a lot of things that we can look at as to why this happened. One thing that should be mentioned is that Shy Money XL, who signed Big K.R.I.T to Def Jam, departed the label in 2013, which was a year after the release of his debut album. As mentioned earlier, this was a man who thought very highly of Krit and thought that he could have been the next big thing in rap. People feel like Live from the Underground had a sloppy rollout and Krit himself felt like K.R.I.T was undershipped, so he urged his fans to purchase the album. While doing research for this video, I came across an interview that Big K.R.I.T did on Sway in 2019 where he talked about his situation with Def Jam. He talked about making the XXL freshman list in 2011 and wondered when his album was going to come out. But unfortunately for Big K.R.I.T, he would be put on the back burner by Def Jam in favor of bigger artists. Throughout this time, he would keep promising the fans that an album was coming, but he was covering up the delays of the album, saying that he was having sample clearance issues. The reality of the situation is that Def Jam had bigger priorities to push rather than K.R.I.T, so he had to wait his turn. In a separate interview, K.R.I.T talked about how when you're young, all you want to do is get a deal and be on the radio. But when you get these things, you normally don't realize what's the next step. Even back in 2011, 1 year removed from signing with Def Jam, K.R.I.T talked about his struggles with the label. It's been up and down. I've been slammed once or twice. I've dealt with a lot of people. I don't want to say shady people, but people who don't see the vision like I saw it. I'm an artist who raps about real life, not necessarily your typical single from a pop artist. I'm taking the road less traveled and making music that really means something to me. After parting ways with Def Jam, Big K.R.I.T would do his own thing with his multi-alumni label. In 2017, Big K.R.I.T would release his first album in 3 years, which was Forever Is a Mighty Long Time. This would be a double disc album that ended up peaking at number 7 on the Billboard 200, selling 33,000 copies in his first week. My favorite tracks from this album are Confetti, Big Bank, Layup, 1999, and Mixed Messages. I also really love the track Subbenstein, aka My Sub Part 4. In my opinion, this is the best song in the series.
Trump knocking when I drive, my sub came alive. Transformer in my ride, my sub came alive.
The album Forever Is a Mighty Long Time is split between 2 discs, with the first representing Big K.R.I.T and the second disc representing Justin Scott. With this album, we also saw K.R.I.T get outside of his comfort zone even more by letting other people like Manny Fresh, DJ Khalil, and Organized Noise alongside himself produce on the album. In an interview with Respect magazine, K.R.I.T would talk about how just like K.R.I.T, he essentially went broke working on this album, with him financing it 100%. On the Justin Scott side of Forever Is a Mighty Long Time, we get more personal tracks, and a track that really exemplifies K.R.I.T's journey is the song Price of Fame. The song Price of Fame was about him coming to the realization that material things and the success that he achieved had went off track from what he originally wanted. The money, the fame, and the parties weren't fulfilling him as a human being. He was writing from the perspective of feeling like Justin Scott, but was trapped as Big K.R.I.T. Before the release of the album, Big K.R.I.T was really depressed and suffered from substance abuse. This would lead him to a road of sobriety that admittedly has its challenges for K.R.I.T. In his line of work, the things that were his vices are easily accessible, which he has said he has to work hard to not slip up. The good thing in this situation is that throughout his life and career, he never lost faith in a higher power. In 2018, K.R.I.T would drop 3 EPs that went to all be compiled into the 2019 compilation album TDT. Also, in 2019 would come the release of Krit's fourth album, Krit Is Here. When I originally made this video, it came right after the release of this album. We would not see another album from Krit until February of 2022, when he released his last solo album to date, which is Digital Roses Don't Die. Less than 2 months after that would come the Full Court Press collab album with Smoke DZA, Girl Talk, and Wiz Khalifa. But this pretty much leaves us to where we are today. In the last chapter of this video, I'll talk about the legacy of Big K.R.I.T. When we look at Big K.R.I.T, we should look at his 2011 freshman class. Fans of K.R.I.T know that talent-wise, he's at the top of the class without a doubt, but he just never went on to be a star in the mainstream like people on the list ended up doing. We can look at Kendrick Lamar as someone who was on the list and was lyrical like K.R.I.T, but blew up in the mainstream. There are a ton of different reasons why K.R.I.T never blew up in the mainstream, which are reasons I've already touched on for the most part. To me, he's always been underrated even to this day, and I feel like he doesn't truly get the love that he deserves. He's a phenomenal artist that I truly believe never got his shine. It was hard for him from the jump, and we can even use the song Children of the World for example. Big K.R.I.T has talked about an A&R trying to discourage him from releasing the song. The A&R's reasoning behind it was because nobody wanted to hear that type of music because people just want to have fun and party. Throughout the years, K.R.I.T has battled with critics over his music because some have claimed that they have had a hard time understanding him. Also, Big K.R.I.T has admitted that his creativity was stifled by the constant pressure to compete on a mainstream level. The label wants to hit platinum albums and things of that nature, and we all know what it involves to get to that. But Big K.R.I.T does not make that kind of music. But on the bright side of things, I think that despite all of what happened in K.R.I.T's career, he will very much like his name be a king remembered in time. He's talked about his music eventually going on to outlast him when he's gone, but this is why we gotta show our love to people while they're alive. I recently did a video on Currency, which you should go check out. I'll put a link in the description. In that video, I talked about Currency's career and the highs and lows that he had to go through to get to where he is today. Even though he never popped in the mainstream, that's perfectly fine because he built a huge fan base in the underground that eats up every release that he drops. Dropping that video felt so good to me because a lot of people rock with Currency and people very much appreciated that I put that together. I wanted to do that same thing with Big K.R.I.T, who is someone who came up in that era. He really put on for Mississippi and definitely left his mark on the game. All in all, let me know what you thought of this video. I love you guys with all my heart. Peace.